What is up, guys? Welcome into another episode of From the Wing. I am Christian Clark, the Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. I've spent this week in Nashville, Tennessee at Pelicans training camp. Nashville is a delightful city. I got an Airbnb about a mile away from Belmont University, which is where the Pelicans are practicing. I've been walking over there every day. You know, we get to see the end of practice. We get to talk to a few players and Willie Green at the end. The Pelicans have also been coming back at night for like a live portion of practice, a scrimmage or whatever you want to call it. We don't get to see that, unfortunately. That's the good stuff. That feels like the good stuff. That's what I really want to see. Maybe you get some hints about the lineups, then you just see how the combinations are working. But it's been a really fun week. Nashville is a nice city. I'm loving my time here so far.
Yeah, the live play is definitely what you want to see, and we get the clipped out stuff. We've gotten some fun clipped out stuff, little sprinkles,
Steve Messi bent the rim.
Topping. Yeah, I mean, hey, cool. I don't know. I want to know how much of that's going to go on during the season, but look, we'll take scraps right now. We're in the joyous, hopeful, hopium period of the season, even though Trey Murphy got hurt.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. So we go into practice on Thursday. We talked to a couple players. We talked to Willie Green. I had a couple questions for Willie Green of stuff I'm writing in the next few days, and I was thinking at the end of the availability, I was like, I should ask if everyone is healthy, and I just didn't. And then I'm sitting down to do some writing at a coffee shop, and the press release comes across, and it's like, hey, Trey Murphy, right hamstring strain. He's going to be out a minimum of 3 weeks. I was like, definitely should have asked the question.
I mean, look,
they always drop the press release on you after you have the media availability, so you can't ask questions about it. We will be able to when we get back in the gym on Saturday.
Yeah, but now they'll be very amply prepared. This is it wouldn't be the Pelicans if an important player at an important time in his career and season didn't get hurt. Like, would it be any other way?
Yeah, we're going to get into the Trey Murphy stuff. We're going to talk about Brandon Ingram, who has apparently had a really good week at camp. Jordan Hawkins, another guy who I think has had a good week. The 5-out Pelicans, and just this idea of going small in general in a league that seems to be getting bigger. It seems like just the bigs in general throughout the NBA have gotten a lot better over the last 5 years. We are, of course, presented by Crescent Canna, New Orleans' #1 cannabis company and the maker of the highly satisfying Crescent 9 THC seltzer. Crescent 9 is uplifting, it's relaxing, and it's my favorite drink to sip on while I'm watching a game. I love to, sip on a Crescent 9 when I'm watching Kirk Cousins, for example, swag surf. It really hits well at a time like that. Crescent Canna has 7 THC beverage flavors ranging from 5 milligram THC per can to 50 milligram THC per can. Because it's made with hemp-derived THC, Crescent 9 THC seltzer is legal for adults from coast to coast. It's also registered with the Louisiana Department of Health for compliance in Louisiana. You can get Crescent 9 at crescentcanna.com or purchase it in person all across Louisiana. Rouse's, Canseco's, Zapardo's, Total Wine, a lot of your favorite stores, bars, and music venues. You must be 21 years older to purchase or consume THC products. Consult with your doctor before using any cannabis product if you have a medical condition or if you're thinking about swag surfing.
Or just don't swag surf, especially if you're Kirk Cousins, because it was what you'd expect. If you had to imagine Kirk Cousins swag surfing, you'd probably be right.
That looked like some of my friends from college after like 10 drinks at a wedding.
It's so terrible. Yeah, that's a great call. It's white guy wedding dance. Yeah, it's white guy wedding dance for sure.
I loved it. All right, Adam. Let's start off with Brandon Ingram. Willie Green praised him effusively after practice on Thursday. I said, "Hey, Willie, how is Brandon fitting in?" He said, "Christian." The quote was, "He's not just fitting in, he's dominating. It's really refreshing to see him come into camp and play at a high level, high speed. He's focused on getting to the rim more, making threes. He'll still have his mid-range game because he's elite in those positions, but overall, his leadership and spirit has been really good." This did spark one thought that I had, and I think there are reasons to be concerned about the situation with Brandon Ingram this season. It is not ideal, him, going into a contract year, being alongside so many other high usage guys. But I will say this for Brandon Ingram. The last time he was in a contract year, it went extremely well. And I'm talking about his first year with the Pelicans, where he was in the final year of his rookie deal. He was a restricted free agent after that year, and he made his first All-Star game and got a max contract because he played so well.
Look, that's we don't want that to be the driver, but if it is the driver, we'll take it. Like, what if we've said we've been to this place where it's like, hey, maybe the situation and the ball handling distribution puts him in a place where like he has to play this good. The market just looked at him and said, hey, you need to do these things you don't do. So yeah, if he wants to, get hot and be the, one time look, Brandon Ingram can do this stuff guy, then more power to him. But I think you hit the big thing on Twitter yesterday. The important thing with Brandon isn't hearing that he is taking a bunch of 3-pointers and all that. Like, that's not as important. Like, he's taking like 70% of his shots from 3 or whatever. They could say all that stuff during the summer that they want. The thing that you remember the most about the best playing time we've seen from him is quick decision making and constant movement. Even when he was on the ball, he didn't like dribble out 7 or 8 seconds. He made a decision and he went, and he either created a great look or he got downhill on somebody so fast they never put a body on him. That's
the shot distribution is important to me. I don't want to pretend like it's not. Like, I would love to see him taking 6, 7, 8 threes per game, driving to the rim with purpose, getting to the foul line, like if you want to do some of the DeRozan stuff, like get in the mid range. I'm not saying don't do that. I mean, he's gotten really good at mid range, pump fake, go into the defender, get fouled. I mean, look, the shot distribution is important, but it's as much about intensity to me. I think a problem with Brandon is the motor just runs kind of cold sometimes. Like, I'm thinking about 2 years ago, it felt like he didn't take the preseason seriously at all. He didn't even play in the preseason until the last game. That was like the game in Birmingham when they played the Hawks. It just felt like, okay, I'm going to like slow play this coming into the year. And I felt like it came back to bite him in some ways. And at least right now, it doesn't feel like that's what's happening. It feels like he's attacking this full speed, and he needs to. He is incentivized to do so because It is time to get that money. I mean, hey, man, hundreds of millions of dollars can be a motivating factor, it turns out.
Especially when you did have some conversations about the potential to move elsewhere. And so you got some feedback from the league, and the feedback from the league is we're all right. Like, we're good. That's a pretty stark like demand on what your season needs to be if you see yourself as that max guy. And look, and we talk about this all the time, but it bears repeating. No one doubts the talent or the ability. It's whatever goes on upstairs about how to play the game. And we've heard him talk like he trusts his inside game a lot. He trusts his jumper, his pull up from 12 to 15 a lot. He can get to it a lot of ways, and he knows it's going to go down. But, the reason, like, DeMar only did this great for 2 years. And when he did it great for 2 years, he was one of the best defenders in the league and was like top 10 in free throw rate. That's the added bit that you tack on to the inefficient shot that makes you an efficient scorer. Like, the guy was putting in he was pouring stuff in at the free throw line. He's not that dude anymore. And he hasn't been that guy for a couple of years. It only worked for 2 years for probably the best guy that's done it. Like, that specific game transition during the hyper efficient threes and free throws like era of the NBA. That's the one guy that really did that to a top 25 player level for a period of time. But look, I don't want to poo-poo it to say that, like, oh, anything positive they say about Brandon is just like is to try and fluff you up. There's probably a tendency to hear that stuff and be like, look, it could be worse. We could be getting non-answers about like why he looks upset or like why he seems droopy already. And that stuff's not happening. There's a lot of smiling going on and we're hearing hyper positive. I'd rather that than the alternative.
There's no signs of Eeyore energy 4 days into camp.
Look,
no Eeyores to be seen anywhere.
Not yet. So it could have been that. It truly could have been. Oh man. Sorry, you said Eeyore and I had to do the Eeyore thing. I'm sorry. I'll go away now.
That was a pretty good Eeyore.
Yeah, I got impressions. No, I'll bust them out on here one day. I got a lot of cartoon characters. I got some celeb voices. We'll work it in.
Look, we've spent the whole summer talking about, well, the Pelicans have all this talent. Does it fit together? One of the benefits of having all this talent is it makes you able to survive injuries better. I mean, it helps you keep your head above water when they occur. And the Pelicans had one this week. Trey Murphy, right hamstring strain, going to be out basically a minimum of 3 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated. We already got the dreaded R word. I've already had to go into my iPhone and go 3 weeks ahead of my calendar and say, this is Trey Murphy's reevaluation date. I've probably done that 25 times since I've been on this beat in 5+ years. So yes, we've got a reevaluation. It's unfortunate. Trey Murphy's going to miss all of the preseason. You know, this could threaten him at the beginning of the regular season. He, of course, missed the first 19 games of last season with a meniscus injury, I believe, in his left knee. So it's not ideal. This is also going to take Trey past the October 21st date, which is the deadline for the Pelicans and Trey to work out a rookie extension. I don't know that this has much of an effect on it at all. I mean, we have enough, game film from Trey Murphy to feel confident about what his value is. I don't think anything he was going to do in these next 3 weeks really was going to swing that, wildly one direction or the other. We kind of know what it is right now. I think that's a hugely important story in the next few weeks. Look, this isn't devastating. I mean, Trey Murphy could be back for all we know, like that Portland trip. They play Chicago the first game of the regular season. Then they're going to go to Portland for 2 and Golden State for 2. Like, he could be back then. It's just not ideal that, a really important player already dealing with a hamstring thing. But the soft tissue things, they happen. The Pelicans aren't the only team they're dealing with something like this.
And some soft tissue is better than others. Like, I'll take a muscle pull over hearing something inside his knee went wonky again, or hearing they got to revisit that meniscus. Like, I'll make the best of it. It happened early. At least it happened early. But at the same time, like, I'm bummed for him because, like, they're kind of like having an open audition for, like, how is this starting five gonna go? And that this would have been a cool opportunity for him to just like go ham in Nashville and like make that decision really, really difficult for people. And, we know how bad he wants it. He says it out loud all the time. He said, in interviews at Media Day that he sees himself as a starter and has seen himself as a starter. So you want to see him get there, even in the swath of talent. We all know what the upside is. We all know his game's going to keep growing, but at least it happened now. Muscle pull, it might be 3 weeks. Might be 4 or 5. Like, he's got to rest it. He's got to rest it and then reactivate it and see how it does. It's not super, super complicated. So it's just like, how does his body handle it? So it sucks to hear. You want him to get back as fast as possible. It might give us some hints to opening night lineups, though, because now all of a sudden decision may be a little bit easier about who that 5 needs to be.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, with any of the clues that you've been able to gather this week, has your thoughts on who you think Willie Green will roll out there on October 23rd changed at all? I have some like different thoughts than I did before Media Day, I would say.
Yeah. Everything everyone has said, players, coaching staff included, David Griffin included, has sold me on more openness. Like, I've heard stuff from Willie I've never heard from Willie before. regarding like the openness to small ball. Like I have never heard him say the words, we may need a different starting lineup matchup to matchup. And he said that. So, okay. Stuff is aligning in such a way where it looks like we may be like Clippers-esque anomalous when it comes to like how we match up night to night. Like if there's a real center, then we play a center. If there's not a real center, it looks like they might go a different way and have like Herb at the 5 or Zion at the 5. It looks like they're just going to look at the personnel and be adaptable. And that's something we talked about. Like, can they do that? Can Willie do something like that? And it sounds that way. And that's, look, we just said it last pod, that would be a departure for the guy that we've been watching coach this team the last couple of years.
Greatly valued lineup consistency. Like one of the things he believed in the most the past 3 years.
And I wonder how much of that, like, I keep going back to the parallel to the team on your hat, because the Tottenham Hotspur has a new coach and they're putting in a new system and everything. And part of the thing is like, you're willing to risk it in games that you could win by doing something different. He emphasizes keeping guys in their roles and having them learn the role so that they know the role inside and out. And then once they know it to that degree, then you can become adaptable. But he wants it committed, cemented in their memory. And I wonder how much of that is like, some of these guys have been here a long time now. They know Willie. They know what he wants out of the positions. DeJounte is kind of like that new face that's in a really prominent rotational role. BI's back, which creates like a depth of experience in the system. So maybe now, like, there is enough trust. There is enough and just scarcity of centers to force this. It's cool to hear, though, because like you have to be this in the NBA. I think we would say at some point the harsh structure of rotations like has to start to bend a little bit to be one of the better.
I think it just depends on which players, like what your roster looks like. And this is a roster that, hey, look, let's change it up from night to night. You know, this is a scenario where that should be in play. I agree with you. Everything we've heard from the players and Willie this week. I mean, even I think Zion said this. There was another player who said this. They were like, yeah, like it's probably going to change, you know, night to night. Like the messaging from the team has been, I don't expect the starting lineup to look the same every single night. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, you know, depending on who you're going up against. I'll ask you this. If the two options against Chicago are DeJounte, CJ, Brandon Zion, and Daniel Tice, or DeJounte, Herb, Brandon Zion, Daniel Tice, which one of those would you, Coach Adam, like to see more against Chicago Bulls on October 23rd?
Honestly, Vooch doesn't do a whole lot to me. Like Vooch is kind of the floor spacer guy. He's like one of those dudes who wants to shoot it. I think I'd open with Herb and see how it goes for a little bit. Like just give it a run, see what it does to you. See if Vooch does start getting the ball down low and try to punish it. But there's not like this amazing center depth in Chicago that's going to punish you. So, you know, it seems like a good first test for like guard him out at the perimeter. He's not a dribbler. So if he's playing out on the arc, then Herb, try it. Let's rip the Band-Aid.
Well, I guess I didn't give you the option to deploy the small lineup there either. I mean, I guess, you know, hey, look, DeJounte, CJ, Herb, Brandon, Zion. I mean, you are pretty small there. Do you think that's like a plausible one for October 23rd, or you're like, that's just too small?
I mean, Vooch is large. He rebounds pretty well. He's not like an elite rebounder. I'm thinking specifically about him, and I can't off the top of my head. I mean, it's him, DeRozan. Quick shout
Patrick
out.
Williams is probably their starting power forward.
Yeah, quick shout out. Lonzo is back. Just want to say that, like, good to see him like back out on the floor. Saw him toss a lob. We haven't seen him play in over 2 years. So cool to see him like working his way back out. But Caruso and their guard play is now Giddey, and it's guys that have historically like wanted to dribble the ball a little bit. It's going to be a little weird for them. They're going to be kind of like the Giddey backcourt Bulls. So Williams and Vooch are like, that is a lot of size to deal with. So I think you probably have to throw Tice out I wasn't really thinking about Patrick Williams, and now that I'm talking it out, Patrick Williams as well at like, 6'8", 6'9" with giant wingspan. You probably need to just have some size out there. So it probably does have to go Tice, just so that you have like the switching adaptability and you feel comfortable. Like if Tice gets moved to the 4, you're fine with that. Like you probably want that comfort level of just a banger.
CJ was asked, hey, by Juan Kincaid with Fox, will you come off the bench if that's what you're asked to do? And he looked like a guy who was smelling some vinegar. He was like, look, I'm not going to volunteer to do it. I get paid to play basketball. I'm going to do what my coach says, but I'm not going to volunteer to do that. His publicly, he's indicated, yes, I will begrudgingly, and I'll just do my job. I think that's going to be an interesting storyline to monitor. I think he'll do it. I think it'll honestly be hard for him to accept. I mean, I was looking through his basketball reference page. This is his 12th year. He has started every single game he's played in for the past 9 years. You have to go back to when CJ was a young lad in Portland, his second year, when he didn't start a game. I mean, that's almost a decade of only starting. I mean, I think that would be a big change if that were to happen at times this year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen. It's going to me, it's going to happen. But look, he kind of said what I expected. Like he gave you a professional answer. He didn't give you a hoodie mellow answer, but he said, I'll do my job, because that's who he is. He's a professional. He is the consummate professional. He's a leader on and off the court with the way he carries himself. He's a leader in the community. Like he's got so much going on to him that like, I'm just not, when the time comes, he knows this is part of his career, but this is hard for every veteran player that has bumped up. Like he's gotten close to like, fringe all-star level play throughout his career. He's dropped 40 balls in the playoffs. Like he's a big time player.
Once you open that door,
yeah,
can you close it either?
Back.
It's like he's 33. I mean, he was coming off like objectively a fantastic season last year. It's like, I'm sure a part of him is looking at like, am I really going to open that door right now when I just had a season when I was third in the NBA in 3-pointers made? And, I had this incredibly efficient season, catch and shoot, off the dribble. I mean, it really was
steals and blocks too. Season. He had a weird pile of steals and blocks through like the first half of the season. He was like top 3 shot blockers on the team. It was very strange.
He got them through that early part of the year when Brandon and Zion weren't playing very well.
Yeah.
And Zion has even said that.
That's one of the things that I appreciate about doing this podcast is we go through like an effort to maintain the nuance of past seasons now that we're like talking about them incrementally throughout the year. And I do not want to forget that part, that they started off messy and CJ carried them to start the year. Like the season could have gone completely differently if he didn't show up big time to start that year. And he essentially like recreated his stats, but as like a part-time corner guy, baseline runners, like he upped his defense. It's going to be up to him, but I think we know with his size and stature, and look, early season, it's probably okay, but he will like wear down and run into more and more physicality as the season goes on. I just anticipate that at some point during the season, that will be too much. We have seen a steady decline. And I talked about this last time. I'll bring it up again. It's going to be the theme of how I talk about him and starting. We have seen a steady decline in his ability to stay on the ball when confronted by an aggressive defender and to initiate that play. We don't want to see him in initiation situations. Now he's potentially the 4th option in that scenario in terms of being the initiator. And that's good. Like we got him another person removed. That's one of the benefits of BI still being here. He's probably another person removed from being under that pressure. But we saw what that looked like, and we've seen what it's looked like progressively over the last 2 years. And it's just, he was already small. He was already not as athletic as everybody else. He's the crafty player. He uses space, uses his dribble to get to the spots he wants. He plays guys against themselves and against their tendencies. He can still do that. But sometimes dudes are just going to be bigger and faster than him. And I think that reckoning is coming, but I'm also just not worried about how he's going to handle it. It'll be interesting to see like how he talks about it and how it occurs and what does it do to his play. But I'm not worried about like how he like feels publicly.
I will say that this past week has made me pretty encouraged about the Daniel Tice part of this. Not as like, oh my gosh, he's like a top 10 starting center in the NBA, but just that he understands his role on this team, and I think is a pretty good fit next to a lot of guys who are going to need the ball. Like Daniel Tice does not need the ball, and he knows where to be on the floor, and he'll make the occasional three, and he'll set screens, and he'll rebound, and he'll just accept that role. And the Pelicans need that, and they don't need a center that's going to post up. And I think JV was really good for them for 3 years. The biggest part of making them like an elite defensive rebounding team. I mean, really, really good player, especially in the regular season. They're probably going to take a step back in terms of rebounding, and I'm interested to see if that's going to be crippling or not. But I think offensively, I like the Tice fit next to a lot of these guys that need the ball.
Corner three, baseline, dunker spot, switch defender. I am so excited to see a bunch of guys that like however the minutes get distributed to the actual centers on the roster. I am excited to see them play that way. And it is part of why I like don't really want to see any Trey Jemison minutes if I can avoid it. I'd rather just go into Carlo and Eves if we're going to do that stuff. But it's also why like there's a fake Twitter trade for Mitch Robinson. I've never seen him as a fit here other than like, hey, local guy comes back. Tice he does the things. We're not saying he's like you said, he's not a top 10 center. He's not gonna be. The one big concern you have with him, he's more athletic than you think. He's more like explosive and strong than you think, but he gets a little like jump happy and he'll foul some guys. Like he'll hack some dudes. So you do have to worry about the foul rate and the exposure. That's what'll happen defensively, but he plays where and how you want him to. And that for us is like a departure. We just haven't had those centers yet. And him and Carlo, at the very least, we know that's how they want to play and that they can. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Steve Kerr at Golden State Warriors camp was asked, hey, look, are you going to start Draymond at power forward or center this year? And he had a 2-minute quote that I thought was really interesting and pertinent to the Pelicans in some ways. And he said, hey, at the beginning of our run, like obviously Draymond going small was a huge key to that. Steve Kerr said he is a little bit wary in today's NBA of starting Draymond at the 5 over the course of an 82 game season. And he acknowledged this league has just gotten bigger. And I thought that was a really interesting thought and relates to the Pelicans with what they're maybe trying to do this year. Steve Kerr has reservations about putting Draymond, the guy who like basically
greatest small ball big defender ever.
Yeah. I mean, like the key to the death lineup besides outrageous shooting. Like if Steve Kerr is worried about that of a guy who's 6'7" and built like a football player and has this really long wingspan, if he's worried about that, about starting him at the 5, I have to say that does, and I don't think the Pelicans are going to do it every night, but it does make me a little bit nervous about like, we're going to put Zion there. Like, it's funny, man. Griff compared Draymond and Zion like before he was a Pelican. If you go read Jake Fisher's article at Sports Illustrated, he's like, hey, Zion could just be like supercharged Draymond with athleticism. And no, Zion does not like doing all that interior. I mean, he likes scoring inside. I don't know if he likes doing a whole lot of other stuff on the interior. I don't know if he loves defensive rebounding and like having a guard 2-1 and pick and roll and all that other stuff. Like all it is to say, he's not Draymond. He's very good, not Draymond.
I don't. So I think the quote was it Draymond with rockets strapped to him. So or a rocket up his ass or something like that. It was something like that. I'll just take the rocket up his ass one. Say it was that one. So I don't want to lose the fact that at the back end of last year, though, when him and BI like found a little bit of symmetry and we had some of those possessions where they were rotating on the centers and power forwards and handling business, Zion did pick up his defense like right at the end of the year. We saw like the shot blocking and movement that we didn't expect. And we saw him calling out like major matchups like Kawhi and Jason Tatum and just wrapping those dudes up. So I'm not ready to completely like let go of the defensive prospects we had for him when he came in the league. Yeah, is he going to be Draymond? No. As far as Golden State, look, we talked about our concerns about like majorly exposing the team to small ball. That's the risk, right? Like if you run a lot of small dudes out there when the average size of every team in the league is like 6'8", 230, like it's gonna hurt, and the miles are gonna add up. And when you have a team full of dudes who all have their own injury histories, that's a risky thing to do. Now, the Draymond concern, he's got a lot of miles. He's older these days. We've seen the last couple of years, he ain't the same guy anymore. You know, he used to have a 3-pointer, and that completely fell off the face of the planet. So it is a little bit different circumstance, but it is notable to say that the most successful small ball team in NBA history with the best small ball big defender in history is telling you like this isn't really an advantage for us, and we're going to focus more on like surviving the year. Now, he may very well lean into more small ball later in the season once they know like where they are in the pack and they're in the stretch run, like the final 15 games. You may see it come back, but putting those miles on Draymond early in the season is probably not wise. This is probably just a smart decision, but you should think about Zion's history. You should think about his injuries and what you want him to be and how much, like, unlike Draymond, we need that Zion scoring. He is the floor tipper. His offense is more important than his defense. So it's a different question.
Yeah, and I think what Steve Kerr is getting at, what we've got on this podcast, going small requires you to expend an incredible amount of energy. And I think that's maybe the central challenge to trying to go small a lot is, can you sustain the necessary energy level to do that at a high level over an 82-game season? I think Zion at the 5, yeah, you can mollywop other teams with it in small sample sizes, but it's another thing to try to do that every single game over an 82-game season. Zion's like 6'5", 6'6", you know, like go look at that photo of Paolo Banchero, Jason Tatum, Zion, and Luka Doncic in China. Zion's the shortest guy out of all 4 of those guys. I mean, he's just not that big of a guy. I'm just telling you, he doesn't love playing center. He doesn't think of himself as big. I'm just telling you that. I'm not guessing. I know. He doesn't love that idea. So look, it's about the energy required to do that at a high level. I mean, we're going to get 2 Warriors Pelicans games early in the season in Golden State. I mean, it's Chicago, then Portland twice, then at Golden State twice. I think that's a back-to-back. I mean, I'm just curious to see what the chess match in terms of lineups is there. Is it going to be Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis? Will the Warriors go small? The Pelicans go small? I'm interested to see how both teams play that.
I think you're going to see a lot of Trace Jackson Davis this year. He really he was pretty consistent with the athletic defense and being like a lob threat for them all throughout the season. But it got good for him at the end of the season. You know, another one of those weird players that is fantasy basketball relevant to Adam McCrary. So I know too much about him. I think Mason had him in our league. So, you know, down with Mason. So we need Trace to suck. Yeah, I think you're going to see Trace because that's the athleticism. That's the guy that can do he can take the Draymond load that you don't want to put on him right now in terms of dealing with those 4s and 5s. And he's a strong dude, but he's small. But it's interesting. I think it's a little bit of a sign from Kerr, hey, this isn't the advantage it used to be either. The league has adjusted to this. The league has compensated for this. The league is wingier now. They've been training themselves for a decade to prepare to shut down teams like this. So there's just no inherent advantage to being fast and dynamic as much as there used to be. So you've really got to execute that at a top level for it to be a differentiator. The fun part for us is we have a one-man differentiator on the roster. And if it works offensively, that dude is impossible to cover. You're going to have to put there's going to be a question every time we put out 5 small dudes. It is how much size are you going to give up knowing that Zion is going to come flying downhill? Who is the dude on your roster that's going to stand in front of that guy? Because the thing everybody runs into is I can't stay in front of him or I can't hold him. And you got to choose, you got to pick your poison. What a lot of them do is if they have a 6'11 guy, the 6'11 guy's in help, waiting at the rim, trying to cut off that path. And the athletic body comes first and they run him into a pile of guys. That's gonna be harder to do if we're making you small. So it'll be interesting to see how well we execute it to start the season.
4 teams in the West that just the idea of going small against them makes me queasy. Memphis, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, Brandon Clark is their bigs. Denver, Jokic and Aaron Gordon is their front court. The Lakers, I feel like the Lakers have just kind of owned the Pelicans with Anthony Davis. Like, he's just too big, too athletic for the small ball stuff. And now the Thunder with Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. Those are the West teams that I'm like, oh God. That makes me nervous.
The one thing about Denver is Denver makes me nervous every time.
Yeah.
It's like, Joker has multiple games where he just decides that the game needs him to play from the perimeter, and he plays inside of 8 feet the whole game and shoots jumpers and stuff and little one-handed runners that look like they shouldn't go in and they just do. He's just hard to deal with. Their team their roster does feel like it got worse though this offseason. It just feels like they've been pushed into a position now where their youth that we thought were going to play last year really, really need to play. Booth has forced them in a direction now.
I mean, they've lost Bruce Brown and KCP in consecutive off seasons. Those
bro.
Good
the best
players.
defenders
Very
on your
good players.
team. Yeah, the best defenders on your team. The most versatile defenders on your team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. I'm with you. Edey, but people aren't going to want to hear this. People are they either love Edey or they hate him. I have been flatly in the middle. I think this dude is going to be a great regular season center that's just going to dump post points on you. And I think the question is entirely about the playoffs and is entirely about pulling the dude out in space. I think he's going to have those problems. I don't think he's going to be an all-star, but I think he's going to be a plug-in, immediate, starting level center of that style. So if you can play him off the court, great. That's the challenge. But if you can't, he's going to block shots. He's going to rebound everything, and he's going to just dunk stuff by standing on his toes. So I'm with you. We know the Lakers stuff. I would love to say I'm not worried about the Lakers. I would love to say, oh yeah, but after Anthony Davis, they're not that big. But we have historically struggled with the Lakers. And even though we put it on them one good time at the end of last year, we need to do it more than that with the aging LeBron to say that they're not a concern. So I think you named all the right teams. I looked at Dallas as well, just because the rotation of bigs now, Lively still protected by the heavy pick and roll. They got better on the wing. They got Gafford. Kleber's going to get healthy at some point. I'm still hoping he gets bought out and somehow ends up on the Pelicans in the middle of the year. But I could see that being a little bit of an issue if Lively improves, but I think you nailed the right teams. I think those are the right ones to be concerned about. And like we talked about, every night might need to be different. Depends who you see. The smaller teams, roll out your small ball, and the other ones, get the bigs in there.
Last thing I got for you, we were talking to Daniel Tice at practice on Thursday, and I was basically asking him a question about the defense. I was like, hey, look, you played against this team a lot. This team was 6th in defense each of the past 2 years. What did they do well? What do you guys think you can be defensively this year? And he's basically like, I think we can be a top 5 defense. Daniel Tice loves this team defensively. And he's basically like, look, our identity has to be turning teams over, getting out and running, taking advantage of the good perimeter defenders we have, and just the dudes that we have who could score in transition. I mean, DeJounte Murray can absolutely be one of those guys. Herb Jones, really good transition player. Trey Murphy, good transition player. Zion, Brandon can do it. I think that has to be what the 2024, 2025 Pelicans are. And this has been what they've been the past 2 seasons, but They've got to rank really high in steals again, deflections, points off turnovers. Like, I need them to be top 5 in all those categories.
I am excited to see what happens on the perimeter when teams start to try to initiate plays against us. I am expecting more top of the floor havoc than even that we've seen, because it just, the fact that Herb doesn't have to be the guy on the scoring ball handler. He could be off. He could be on the shooting guard. He could be on the wing, floating as like the guy that's going to rotate in and be the help.
Yeah, how much free safety is Herb going to play?
Oh, I mean, it feels like a lot. People can talk about like DeJounte and Atlanta, and I look at his Atlanta stint so differently than most people. I'm fully expecting the defense that you saw from, a bad Spurs team, but I'm fully expecting that level of defense and Herb as like this secondary level. And if that stuff's happening, you're going to have a lot of reps where the defense is very, very easy for guys 3 through 5. And if there's, an additional concern I have about Tice, it's like he gets, I mentioned he gets a little slap happy. He's going to foul some dudes, but some of those fouls are just good, tough fouls. He's pretty physical with guys. He gets in the air and like really puts a body on dudes. His defense can be up and down in a game the longer you expose him. So he's kind of like individually a middle of the road defender, but in a pure Willie switching scheme where Willie finally gets a center that's going to be like moved on to a 3 and the 3 is 6'6" or 6'7" and the dude can stay in front of him. That's a new thing. That is not a thing we've had. So it's like a super version of having to play Jeremiah Robinson Earl. He's going to get the defensive look that he's wanted this whole time. So I'm very, very intrigued to see how Tice holds up with that major defensive pressure up top. Cause I think it's a decent ask. I think they could be really, really great defensively again. Cause I think it leans more into what Willie wants.
Pelicans they've got an off day today, which is Friday. They got 2 days left of camp in Nashville. I'm heading home Saturday night. First preseason game Monday, a 12:30 p.m. Monday game at Smoothie King Center. I think the Saints are in Kansas City for Monday Night Football.
They are.
I can't say I've ever done one of those that wasn't on like Martin Luther King Day, like a 12:30 Monday tip.
Sure. Sure. Weird. Gonna be so weird, but I'm gonna find a way, even if I have to just like go radio version, throw my AirPods in, because your boy got work. And speaking of that, it is 7:24 and I got this coffee, but I need to go make breakfast and get to the office.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. We're going to start our days. We'll talk again next week.